We are following an extremely disturbing story in Sudan, where a 19-year-old girl has been sentenced to death for killing her husband, who allegedly raped her. Noura Hussein's story has sparked international outrage. It's also triggered a social media campaign calling for justice and demanding an end to child marriage. The United Nations and other groups have asked the Sudanese government to free her. And for more now on this, we want to bring in CBS News foreign correspondent Debora Patta. She's with us now from Johannesburg. So, Debora, for people who are not familiar with this case, explain exactly what happened here and what led to Noura being sentenced to death.
Anne-Marie, the case of Noura Hussein is about as brutal as any story gets. This young girl, several years ago, at the age of about 15, they're not sure because she doesn't have a birth certificate, was forced into a child marriage by her parents. She refused. She did not want to get married. She wanted to continue to study, to further her education. So she ran away to an aunt where she stayed for several years and did continue her studies. Then her father phoned her and said she should come back home. The marriage was off and everything was fine. She did exactly that, but it was a trick. She was trapped. When she got back there, the husband was waiting. They forced her into the marriage. And for 4 days, the husband tried to consummate the marriage. But again, Noura refused. She did not want this marriage. Then on the 5th day, she says he came back with relatives. The relatives held her down while the husband raped her. This happened again on a 2nd day. He came back wanting to repeat the rape, but this time she grabbed a knife, she stabbed him to death, and that is why she has been sentenced to death herself, because in terms of Sudanese law, marital rape is not recognized as a crime.
So you have spoken to her lawyers. Where are they at with this case? And I know there's a lot of, interest in this case outside of the country, including the United Nations. Can the UN or anyone else prevent her execution?
Well, what's happening now is that Noura has a team of between 12 to 15 lawyers, all Sudanese, who are helping her right this minute. They are all pro bono and offering their services on a daily basis for free to her. So she is certainly very well looked after in terms of legal aid. There has been huge global attention on this case, but ultimately it is up to the Sudanese government and the Sudanese justice system to ensure that she does not go through with this death penalty. What the lawyers are doing is very interesting because there's a contradiction in Sudanese law. Article 15 of the Sudanese constitution states that nobody can be forced into a marriage, that a bride has to give her consent, even if she is under the age of 18. And this clearly did not happen in this case. Noura resisted over and over again. She ran away. She refused to consummate the marriage. So the lawyers are going to argue that there was no marriage and that she was in fact raped because there was no marriage, and therefore she acted in self-defense. They have until the end of the week to file for leave to appeal. If that is granted, it will still take some time. It is Ramadan there, so things could be held up. But given the international focus on this, I think the lawyers are hoping that things will proceed quite quickly. When I spoke to her lawyer just last night, in fact, she told me that Noura is doing incredibly well. She was terrified at first. She's been in jail for actually over a year already, but that she has heard of the international attention and has really been encouraged by all this global outrage and support.
I know you've spent time in South Sudan, also in Niger. How common is child marriage in this part of the world?
Well, out of the top 10 countries that have the highest rates of child brides, child marriage, 9 of them are on the African continent, the 10th being Bangladesh. And of that, Niger is number 1. It has the highest incidence of child marriage. 76% of all children under the age of 18 are married. South Sudan is also in the top 10. 52% of its children under the age of 18 are married. That's just next door to Sudan. And there are many drivers for this, but primary among them is poverty. Families think that if they marry their young daughter off, she will be be looked after by another family. There's also fear of premarital pregnancy, of rape, and also cultural tradition. This is a tradition in many African countries and is supported by the law. In Niger, which is number one, it rates number one in terms of child marriage and the high incidence there, you can get married legally at the age of 15. So there's a lot of work to be done in these countries where women are still subjected to these cruel laws and mostly cannot continue their education. Both the United Nations and the African Union have programs, but it's a long haul. This is going to take a long time to accelerate an end to child marriage.
Yeah, you mentioned that in Sudan, marital rape is not a crime. You know, what does this say about the laws in Sudan, particularly as they pertain to women?
Well, women have very few rights there, and children even less. Take the case of Noura Hussein. She was condemned first by her father, then by her husband, and then by the state. And even the family of her alleged husband, they could pardon her. They can demand blood money, and in this case, they're demanding execution. But they could show her mercy, and they have not done that to her. So on every page, she has been denied any sense of justice at all, or looking at this case with compassion. This is a young girl who just wanted to continue her studies. And I think what you'll find in a country like Sudan and many of the other African countries is that young girls lack access to opportunities, and particularly they lack access to education. And this is one of the big drivers that makes child marriage a thing that is legal and supported. But interestingly, in Sudan, it's not just global support for Noura Hussein. There's been a lot of support for her within the country, a sign perhaps that the people of Sudan are growing tired of these kinds of laws.
Oh, that is very interesting, and perhaps sort of a little sliver of hope. But you know, this case is getting a lot of attention. You know, there are thousands of other Nouras out there that are not getting any attention at all. Debora Patta, thank you so much.